3, 2, 1. Okay, Chair.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to the September 2nd special call meeting of the ACC Winterville JDA. We're starting the meeting at 5:34 p.m. Eastern Time. First item is approval of the agenda. I'd like to put forth a motion to approve the agenda. Do I have a second? Erica seconds. All right. Any changes or discussion about the agenda? We got a lot to cover today. All right. All those in favor say aye. All right. Opposed? All right. The motion carries unanimously. The next item is the approval of minutes from our last meeting. I'd like to put forth a motion to approve those minutes.
Second.
Who seconded? Dodd seconded. All right. Dodd seconded it. Any discussion of the minutes from the last meeting? Any changes need to be made? I didn't see any. Okay. Well, I'm not hearing any concerns. So all those in favor of approving the minutes from August 26th, say aye. Any opposed? All right. Motion passes unanimously. The next agenda item, which is is our old business. I think what's going to take the most amount of our time, frankly, is discussing what criteria or what things CARES money can be used for. I'm very frustrated because reading all these FAQs and the guidelines, they're very vague. And Dan, I'm hoping you have some guidance that you can give us in that regard.
Well, I have the best guidance available, which is
Your
not
guess
much
as good as mine.
Which is not much different than what you said. Do you want to jump into that?
Well, we have to put it in. I mean, to me, it's the one that's going to involve the most discussion, as far as I'm concerned. But
well, I'm going to have to kind of back into it. You know, we have assumed going through this in connection with the loan program that the losses incurred and reduction in cash availability is COVID-19 related. And we don't have not had a word in the loan program about that. And it's, you know, kind of obvious. I mean, there may be other explanations. Not every business survives, but in general, during that particular time period, the board has kind of made a determination that there's a cause and effect relationship. The grants are sort of in that pot, but if we're using COVID-19 related as the driver on this, then is it possible to come up with a long list of examples, or how do we add substance to that? The best I've been able to do is this. I mean, in the business world, this is playing out in two particular fields. And I don't know if y'all read the same sort of publications I do, and if you do, I'm sorry for you. But you can almost not avoid running across articles about force majeure and business interruption insurance. Y'all read any of that?
no.
So there are just about every business in its policy, insurance policy, has something that we don't have in ours. We don't have business interruption insurance. And that's not the same as property insurance. It's not the same as liability insurance. It basically insures against the loss of revenue if the business is not able to operate. So there are, and that's necessary, for example, if there's loans outstanding, I mean, not just to stay in business and operating, but to avoid foreclosure. You've got to have revenue to, you know, pay your mortgage, for one thing. So there are lawsuits. I mean, they're filed almost instantaneously, and there's more every day. about whether COVID-19 is covered under policies of business interruption insurance, even policies, and not all of them do, that mention pandemic or epidemic, and the decisions are going against the businesses. There was an article in this morning's Wall Street Journal, and I can send the link to the group if you like. But the keystone or touchstone in the insurance world is that business interruption requires direct physical loss or damage. Direct physical loss or damage. And if we had that, obviously there's a cause and effect relationship. There's a pandemic, there's physical loss or damage caused to the business, and pretty understandable. But that's not so easy when it's a virus. What some folks are alleging is that the coronavirus is a hazardous physical substance that permeates the air and sticks to surfaces and causes both physical loss of and damage to property. And there's some truth to that, and that's why folks, restaurants, for example. I remember stopping at a Cracker Barrel on my way back from somewhere. I don't even remember where. 75 North. I was stopped on some exit, and this had just happened, and this was before the closure orders and emergency health guidelines came out. And the folks at Cracker Barrel, it was one person or family group to table, small groups. And before anybody could be seated, they get out disinfectant and wipe down the table, wipe down the chairs. So they were getting rid of something that they thought was on the furniture. It's a minority view, but this is a contract. And within the limits that the Supreme Court will go along with us, we can write the contract however we want to. So we can interpret COVID-related as something that basically causes or could cause business interruption in the sense that the virus affects the physical part of the operation of the business, like the restaurant example that I just gave you. The other example that is widespread is claims of force majeure relating to contract performance. And this is not operation of a business, it's honoring your obligations to somebody else, contractual obligations. And I've actually had to negotiate this pretty heavily in MOUs with increasing detail over the last few months. What I have settled on as an acceptable definition, when somebody wants a force majeure clause in an MOU now, we all know there's COVID-19, so it's not unexpected. The definition of force majeure is something that the parties didn't expect, because if they did, it's factored into the contract already. The grant contract between the state of Georgia and Athens-Clarke County has a provision in they all do. It's a form contract. So every community that has a contract with the state has got this language in it. And it says, to the extent that Georgia state of emergency relating to unlawful assemblage and violence and the Georgia public health states of emergency related to COVID-19 become more severe since August 31st, 2020 and lead to the impossibility to perform any obligation under this agreement, then riots and pandemic may be asserted as force majeure events. So that is a less specific and more subjective cause and effect relationship. But anything that would be considered force majeure under that definition, I think, is COVID related. How to express that in a contract, I'd have to give some thought. But it's helpful that we're not trying to be strict. We're trying to be lenient, as I understand it, with this. We're just trying to achieve the minimum that the law requires. So unlike my MOUs, where I represent the public body and I want a really high hurdle for somebody to avoid an obligation to my client, in this case, we want to satisfy the minimum legal requirements so that if they can make a case, then it's COVID related and they're grant eligible. That's really the gist of where I've been able to get with this so far.
Well, my reading of these documents, it seems to me that the wording is that you cannot use this money for payroll and for private employee payroll. Is that consistent with what you read? I mean, Yep, it was one of the Q&As that talked about it.
Let me tell you something that's going to make you happy. And I like when I can do that. And this goes back to a discussion that I had around the terms and conditions of the intergovernmental agreement. Y'all will remember in our last meeting, I talked about, out of an abundance of caution, we want to flow down the restrictions in the intergovernmental agreement as far as we could, so that if challenged, we'd be able to point to restrictions in our agreement with Athens-Clarke that were consistent with the federal guidance. The federal guidance is very strict. So it's basically says about this that in order to make a grant to small businesses, and the scope of that would include grants to pay private payroll, there's a specific provision dealing with public payroll, and particularly public payroll for public safety employees. But we would have to put in our agreement, or in our grant documents, that you would not be eligible for a grant at all if you're a small business unless your business had closed and had been required to close. So there's nothing like that in our documents, and I don't think there's anything like that in any other grant documents, because your scope of eligible grantees is very, very small if you restrict it that way. So what we've got in our intergovernmental agreement, and I don't know how closely y'all read that. Let me read you the key part of it. I had it up earlier today. I can find it real quick. All right, I'm going to have to open the file. Wait, bear with me just a moment, please. All right, so
Are y'all able to see that?
well, yeah, I can. That's great. Thanks.
Okay.
All right, so disbursement. This is 2B. Can you find 2B for us? 2B or not 2B? There you go. So disbursement of said funds must either be allowable pursuant to the requirements of the CARES Act or represent disbursement of proceeds of an allowable reimbursement to the unified government. Actually, I must be looking at a later. Yeah, you've got, I opened the wrong one. So let me look at what's on the screen. Or represent disbursements. Nope, it's the same thing. Must either be allowable pursuant to the requirements of the CARES Act or represent disbursement of proceeds of an allowable reimbursement to the unified government, and said funds must be used by December 30, 2020. I still don't think this is the final version. I talked with the ACC attorney about a change, and I guess I didn't get sent the final version of it. I'll ask for it. But even with the language there, but particularly with the change, what we're doing is dealing with the proceeds of unallowable use of CARES Act funds and not the CARES Act funds themselves. So an example is if you sell your house, say you've got a mortgage that says that you can't install playground equipment on it for some reason, and you sell the house and you get proceeds, then you can buy a new house and put up playground equipment, because you're not dealing with the mortgage property, you're dealing with the proceeds of the mortgage property. So the money coming into the unified government from the CARES Act program was used to reimburse itself for prior public safety employee salaries. And what that does is to cut the strings that were attached to the money, so that what we have to do now is to expend money that represents the proceeds of an allowable reimbursement to the unified government. And that means that the making of grants for salaries, private sector salaries, isn't subject to that restriction that I just mentioned, that it has to go to businesses that were the subject of a required closure. In other words, what COVID related is pretty much up to us to decide. I'd like for it to be as faithful as possible to what the intention of the program was, but we're not going to have to comply with the literal letter of it. If we had to, we couldn't do this at all, or we could only do it in a very limited way.
I hate this. Go ahead. Go ahead, David.
Well, the guidance says that for grant to small businesses to reimburse the cost of business interruption caused by required closures, and they don't have to necessarily be closed due to a stay-at-home mandate. They can close if they don't feel safe in opening, and they can still count whatever those costs are. But that's as detailed as it gets from the government.
I think required closures means the governor saying restaurants you must close, movie theaters you must close.
Well, according to the Q&A, it asks the question: does the a stay-at-home order mandate is the same thing as a closure of a business? And they said no. You don't have to adhere to a state mandate if you have to close. That's what I've seen.
Let me get it up.
It's item number 32 on the Q&A.
Okay. Well, I see your point there. This is the same circular thing that we talked about last week.
Right. This is a Q&A from the government, and they say you don't have to have a stay-at-home order or other public health mandate in order to give money to businesses that were required to close. That's why I read the Q&A.
I never heard back. The DCA was supposed to check with the federal government. Of course, I never heard back from them. So I don't know what the latest official word is. Of course, a stay-at-home is not the same as a business closure, but this does say in that last sentence, in the absence of a requirement to close businesses, if the relevant government determines that such expenditures are necessary in response to the public health emergency. That determination would have to be made by Athens-Clarke because it's the recipient of the funds, and it would have to pass that determination on to us, and it's not in the intergovernmental agreement. And we can go back and revisit that. But when I got to the point where we were going to be dealing with reimbursed funds without those restrictions, that kind of closed the book on it for me. But I have no problem at all with going back and adding something specific about that. It could be we can add a determination to the intergovernmental agreement. There's plenty of them in that resolution I sent you already. So what's one more?
Can you all look at the chat?
Well, I mean, I'm fine with that as long as the federal government's fine with it.
Well, the
And
state
I guess
is doing it. State
Sorry?
State of Montana's CARES funds, they set up a small business grant program at a state level, and this is what they say.
I'm fine with it if ACC is fine with it. I understand that they're the ones that determine what we can use it for. Is that right, Dan?
Yes, the money comes, the strings this time are in the intergovernmental agreement. There's actually a clause in there which I really like, which says that each is responsible for its own compliance. So ACC is responsible for complying with the state and in turn to the federal government. We're responsible for complying with our obligations to ACC. If it's not in that intergovernmental agreement, we don't have the obligation. Now, we want to be good partners and good stakeholders with ACC. We don't want to go down we don't want to go somewhere we shouldn't go. But what I'm reading here on a federal level is consistent with two things. It's consistent with that question 32, if ACC makes a determination. It's also consistent with using reimbursement proceeds because that cuts the strings at that point. So in terms of adding a use of proceeds, I guess I'm saying I'm okay with it anyway, regardless of whether ACC makes a determination because of the reimbursement aspect of it. But that's on a federal level. On a state level, we still got the really sensitive issue of gifts and gratuities. Montana doesn't have a gifts and gratuities clause in its constitution. Georgia does. So a classic example of, in fact, it's in the Constitution. This is one of the examples they use of a gift or gratuity is paying the debt of another. So you just can't do that. We can't. I'm going to wrap it up and tell you a way that we can, but unless you do it right, you can't pay somebody else's mortgage or loan because that's his debt. It's not ours. That's a gift or gratuity. The only way that's okay is if we get back equivalent public benefit. And I'm sure y'all haven't had a chance to look at the resolution. It's not that long, but I spent virtually all afternoon working on it. When you get a chance, on page 5, subsection G, Ilka, are you able to put that up? That would be helpful if you could. I like the way that clause ends. In order to retain existing businesses, retain current employees, or retain business viability for future reemployment. I like that. That's good. So page 5, subsection G. All right. So Stephanie's email earlier today or last night, whenever it was, about the public benefits was helpful. It got me thinking about something. The constitutional rule is that in exchange for something we provide, for that something, we have to get equivalent benefit. And that means if someone only chooses one public benefit commitment and gets the largest loan and the largest grant that we award, then any one of those public benefit commitments, any one of them, we have to determine to be at least equal in value to the maximum combination of loans and grants that we make. So point number one, we don't have a maximum in here anywhere. I think we need to add a maximum. I don't know whether we were thinking about it or not, but if the maximum's unlimited, then theoretically somebody could get a very large amount of money. So I think we need a maximum. The other thing is, and this is going to not be popular at all, in looking at the list of the public benefits, I thought female and minority-owned businesses were an add-on that would grant extra points, but the way they're listed, they are independently a public benefit, if I'm reading it right. So it's a public benefit on the part of an applicant simply to be minority owned or female owned. And that by itself is not, I mean, you could have two businesses side by side and each could have the same percentage of minority and female ownership, but one could be providing public benefit in the constitutional sense and the other one not. So I think you have to change that so that those last two public benefits are really bonus points instead of being independent qualifiers.
So what you're saying is that they can't be in the public benefit list because we only require them to choose one. And if they choose that one, they're not really choosing a public benefit.
Exactly so. That's it. Exactly.
I wonder if we could also build it into the item that says that businesses will, and I don't remember the exact wording, but they will commit to spending money local where possible. I wonder if we could say spending money locally or with local women or minority owned businesses. Could we build it into an item like that, either local women or minority owned? Or does that complicate it too much?
It's too hard for someone to know that. I mean,
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
So in the latest chat entry, the suggestion to exclude debt service grants, that leaves it, grants will provide working capital for small businesses to support payroll, rent, accounts payable, and expenses related to shifts in operations in order to retain existing businesses, retain current employees, or retain business viability for future reemployment. I could sign off on that.
I like. So that's our allowable uses then.
Okay. Yep. As long as we're this nebulous cares thing, I guess we can write our own description.
Dave, we're going to be okay with that. I mean, I feel comfortable that the ACC attorney will be on board with this interpretation, but keep in mind, though, that it's a requirement in our IGA that we take our program documents back, the very things that we're talking about with all the eligibility requirements and lists of public benefits and all, we take back to the ACC manager for approval. And I think that's a good thing. And that means we don't have to wonder whether we're within the scope of what was intended with that intergovernmental agreement. We get sign off on it. And Blaine's not going to sign off on that without talking to the city attorney. So I think we get the comfort that we need through the normal process. But I'm okay with it. I mean, I've had to look long and hard in it, and it's a delicate balancing act to balance the federal requirements and the state requirements. But I think this does it. And again, as far as I know, we're the only ones doing this. So
Dan, can that same statement be used for both the loan and grant funds?
There's really not any difference between them. The money is the same sort of money. A grant is more sensitive than a loan. So I'm going to give you a yes on that.
Okay. I want
What about the public
question? Go ahead.
What about the public benefit? Is there any way to sort of weave in anything related to the census? I'll drop it if you tell me no. I just was trying to think of a way for us to have a benefit that would be kind of a win-win, but I'll let it go if you say it's just not. I see your smile, Dan.
Let it go. Let it go.
Okay.
I'm in favor of responding to the census, but that's
okay. It's a stretch.
Imagine yourself in front of a judge trying to explain that.
Okay.
All right. So it sounds like we did decide on our criteria. The text that Stephanie put in the chat is what we're going to go with. It'll be grants and loans will provide working capital and or loans.
All right. I had my 3 a.m. Night of the Soul this afternoon around 3 a.m. So I have another thing to bring out. This was mentioned in one of the emails, which is nonprofits. Our documents, I mean, the only reference, I guess, to nonprofits, at least I didn't search, but I think, is to sectarian as opposed to secular organizations. But if we're making grants to small businesses, is a nonprofit a business for that purpose?
I mean, it generates revenue. Some of them generate revenue through commercial purposes. Some of them generate revenue strictly through grants and donations. And technically, they are a business. But I know it's probably just me not wanting to be unfair, but nonprofits have so many avenues of revenue, commercial and otherwise, that businesses don't have. And they've been able to get money where businesses have not been able to.
It's legally easier to give them money, and they make a more compelling story. So are we excluding nonprofits from these programs entirely?
We discussed it several times. Now, I have a strong opinion about it, and maybe I've overpowered everyone else, and I don't want to be the decider, but Athens has something like several thousand nonprofits, and every one of them, they're professional grant writers. They look for grants. So they will get all the money, and our businesses will not, because they will be able to respond quicker, because this is what they do.
One thing I will say, just sort of fact-wise for background, is that the unified government has given out through housing and community development already, I think 2 rounds or 1 round and about to do a 2nd round, 3 rounds. The mayor, maybe you should, yeah. So 3 rounds that are targeted at nonprofits that are serving the needs of our community right now. And then there's also the Athens Area Community Foundation, which is gathering and distributing donor funds. And they've already done, I mean, they are regional because it's Athens area, but I think they've done 3 or 4 rounds targeted to also to different needs related to COVID in the community. So that might just be helpful as some background.
Well, I personally am fine not excluding them. Nonprofits, what do other people feel? I know it's how Stephanie feels, and I can be on board with that.
Did you say you're okay with not excluding them, or you're okay excluding them?
Yeah, okay, excluding them. I may have double negative something, but I'm okay excluding them from apply.
I agree. I think that nonprofits have a lot of revenue streams that are already non-traditional, and they may not have been hurt by COVID. They certainly were able to operate for the most part in their fundraising activities.
I will say, obviously, there's a whole waterfront of different sorts of nonprofits. There are those kinds that provide homeless assistance or food aid or rental or utility assistance. And those are the ones that have benefited from 2 rounds of local dollars and then some CARES dollars themselves. But then there are a lot of other kinds of nonprofits, say arts-focused nonprofits that, or even youth development nonprofits that haven't benefited from any funds this year that are pandemic specific, whether local or CARES Act dollars. And I think the number, Stephanie, is around 500 nonprofits in Athens-Clarke County that are chartered here. So it is a lot. But you know, I wouldn't exclude them simply thinking that they do have all these other avenues. I mean, I think many of them are strapped as, you know, a small business that does retail work or professional services.
Okay, so it sounds like your consensus of excluding them.
My objection really is to faith-based charities, and I think that there's not a way that we can open it up to charities without opening it up to faith-based charities. Across the board, no faith-based for government money.
Eric, I'm not really sure what you're suggesting.
So I'm concerned that if we say, okay, you know, 501c3s can apply for this, that I just don't want to funnel government funds to faith-based charities. So any sort of religious organization that might apply, even if it looks good on paper. I don't think that because they don't pay taxes, even though their members might, they as an entity don't pay them. I don't want to give them government. Whatever.
I think we secular organizations as excluded from funding, so and board religious. I think we've already had that in our
Yeah, do nonprofits file a business license occupation tax just like everyone else?
I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to that question.
Because we would
I
be,
can Google it while we're.
we'd have to have that, or our qualification process wouldn't be valid.
Well, I'm hearing everybody saying to exclude nonprofits, including secular organizations. So
If that's what the board wants to do, what I'd like to do is to add a finding into that resolution that we have valid reasons for doing it, so we're not accused of discriminating. So I'm fine with it. I'd like to add a couple of sentences before it's all over to the resolution.
okay. All right. Well, I think we've resolved the allowable expenses issue, which I'm glad we got through that. Looking at some of the things that we need to talk about, we do have the intergovernmental agreement. I know it was approved last night by the mayor and commission. It's something I think we need to approve as well. I'm assuming.
Mr. Chairman, would you like for me to review the resolution? I sent you it 15 minutes before the meeting started.
I've got it. I mean, I've got it here, but I haven't had a chance to read through it.
Of course. This is, if I may, this is the form of the resolution. It doesn't have to be tonight. It doesn't have to be exactly these words, but we do need something formal in order to launch the program. What this resolution would do when you get through the, if everybody has a, Ilka, can you bring it up on the screen?
Sorry, I was trying to see in the code if a nonprofit. So sorry, tell me one more time what document you need.
It's the resolution that came in at 5:15.
JDA
Okay,
approving resolution, all caps.
Yes, I've got it. Hold on one second. This one.
Oh, that's it. Yeah. So scrolling back to, yeah. So the first page is just the background information that we already know. Move on down to the second page. There is a great deal of legal infrastructure to the ability of Athens-Clarke to do what it's doing and the JDA to do what it's doing. We've talked a lot about the JDA's authorization to do it. So the second page basically tees up the ability of Athens-Clarke to do what it's doing and the JDA to do what it's doing. And it gives you a lot of the defined terms. Recitals K and L talk about specific agreements to be approved. And one is the form of the promissory note that I sent. I don't know when I sent that. Was it yesterday or today? Maybe it was this morning. And we also have the administrator and servicer agreement with the bank. And we also have the intergovernmental agreement with Athens-Clarke to be approved. So the first parts of, if you scroll down to Article 2.
Sorry, I missed it when the door opened.
Keep going, Article 2.
Okay.
You're headed in the right direction.
Okay.
All right, so this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sections. And these sections approve the intergovernmental agreement, approve the form of the note, approve the agreement with First State American, and reapprove all of the other program documents, including our discussion through tonight of changes to them. And then 2.05 provides general authorization. Article 3 is the legislative findings, and these things are, in my world, are really, really important. So, for example, the intergovernmental agreement requires us, and originally it was a pretty severe restriction, but as written finally, all it requires is for us to make a determination that we're not violating gifts and gratuities. So if you read through A, B, C, D, E, F, and G and get down to H, you find out that in light of all the other things, we're not violating gifts and gratuities. Somewhere in there, I'll throw in that we have a rational basis for excluding nonprofits, but that's what this document does. And we need, I don't think the form of the intergovernmental agreement is going to change because, the ACC's already approved it. The note, y'all need to have a look at it, and I doubt you have, and First American needs to look at it. I've not heard back from the bank about the administrator and servicer agreement, so I don't know whether everything's fine or whether their lawyer hadn't gotten around to looking at it yet or not. But we are able now, I guess, tonight, if you wanted to adopt this resolution, because it does authorize, particularly the chair, to agree to changes in these documents afterwards if necessary. So if we have a feeling for the scope of what changes might be necessary, like, for example, excluding nonprofits, or if we want to get what we think are final documents ready, and I need to talk a minute about bank regulation, then we can have another meeting quickly to do that. And the other meeting wouldn't be very long. So this is the operative document in terms of approving and launching the program, this resolution here.
Okay. So you're saying that we don't necessarily have to see these other documents and approve them prior to approving this resolution. Is that what you're saying?
No, you have seen them. You haven't had a chance to read them. But
I know I'm uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable with that. Approving something I haven't read, but
I can certainly understand that. So I'm sorry I couldn't get them to you earlier, but again, there's a lot of background work going on to get here. So what I would suggest is that review these without being hurried. Let me have any comments, and then let's have another meeting as soon as you're ready to do it. And there's another thing that might influence that too. Let me mention, I have the last 2 or 3 meetings, I've mentioned that we needed to take a look at federal regulation of banking. And we don't think of ourselves as a bank, but the law will sometimes surprise you. We're not a traditional bank because we don't take deposits. And because of that, we're not subject to the Bank Secrecy Act, fortunately. There are 2 other federal bank regulations that have gotten kind of sticky. One is the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, which primarily, as far as has been discussed, relates to notifying disappointed borrowers that they weren't approved and why they weren't approved. I have been, have any of y'all ever done business with a specialist before? Anytime you ask a specialist a question about their specialty, you're going to get a lot more information, and everything that's going to turn out has something to do with the specialty. So I've been fighting a battle on our mutual behalves with one of my partners about this. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act applies, in my view, to an entity that is in the business of lending. I don't think we're in the business of lending. We've got a special program that's not going to last forever. But those of you who've been to some of my sidebar conferences, I've given you before the answer to any legal question. It's 2 words. Can somebody remind me what it is? It depends.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to be successful in getting my partner to tell me the Equal Credit Opportunity Act doesn't apply. What I'm getting is it depends. The other potential regulation is the one having to do with ECOA. I don't even know what those initials stand for. It's the one where you say you're not a terrorist. The definition of the covered parties that I was reviewing earlier today does not include governmental units, not surprisingly. But again, I get kind of an it depends, and also I thought this was actually pretty insightful. It might really be a good idea for us to comply with this, even if we don't technically have to, because we don't want to make a loan to somebody that turns out to be on that list of prohibited folks. I think we can get the bank to do that. The bank has to screen their own borrowers, so we'll put in the servicer agreement that they'll screen these folks. It also means that we need to put in our list of ineligible borrowers somebody that's on the proscribed list. So that affects the documentation. Most recently, I have asked, okay, if we have to comply with the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, what does that mean? And I haven't gotten an answer yet. I don't think it means much. I think it means you have to explain why you didn't make the loan, and we have a scoring mechanism. It's completely non-discriminatory. And that may be all it is. And if that is all it is, then it's probably easier to just go ahead and do it than to not be certain about it. But if it's very burdensome, then I'll have to ask the board to make a decision whether you feel like it's enough of a risk of non-compliance to not comply. And again, I don't think anybody else is complying with this. In all the publicly available information, I haven't seen anything about access to credit or notification if you didn't get the loan and that sort of stuff. Stephanie, have you seen anything? I know you've looked at some of these things. Have you run across anything like that?
About, say that again?
Whether anybody, a potential borrower under any of these loan programs, is protected by the Federal Equal Credit Opportunity Act?
I've not seen that at all, but maybe I wasn't looking for that to see it. You would have seen it.
Yeah, and I haven't. And I've asked around, and I don't think anybody's doing it. But it's that old story like my mother used to tell me, just because your friend's jumping off the roof doesn't mean you should jump off the roof. So the gifts and gratuities issue is a real one. I mean, that's not specious at all. We have to comply, are complying. With me, the jury's still kind of out on the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. If it turns out that compliance doesn't mean much and it doesn't affect our documents, then and we have to add something to our decline letter. We have an approval letter and a decline letter. The reason given in the decline letter is not enough money. But if underlying that is the fact that you scored so low that we ran out of money before we got to you, then maybe that has to be said too. So I need a little bit of time to resolve that in my own head, or we just either decide tonight or whenever that we don't think we're in the business of lending, and that we're not going to worry about it. My recommendation is to give it until tomorrow to find out. I'm not going to find out anything more about it applying or not, but I'll find out what is required if we do apply, and we can decide whether it bothers us to do that or not. I tell you this, if I were a judge, I would say it doesn't apply. And I'm saying that because I started out as a securities lawyer, and it matters whether you're a federal broker dealer in the securities world, because you have to be registered if you are. And that depends on whether you're in the business of buying and selling securities. So one sale, you're not in the business. Maybe one loan program, you're not under the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. But that's kind of the way I'm leaning on it. But I'd rather not make a recommendation tonight, because I'm still kind of at the it depends stage myself.
So I do want to raise a question. If it is a revolving loan fund and we think these funds will be repaid and then we'll reloan them at a future phase, does that impact
it? Couldn't quite hear you, Ilka.
Sorry. If this is going to be a revolving loan fund, meaning this first phase of loans will go out the door, and then once they're repaid, hopefully, we may use those funds in the future and reloan them again. Does that sort of change the thought about whether we're in the business of lending?
That's a very good point. There's no outside date for that. It just goes on forever.
I mean, that's kind of how revolving loan funds work, is that as it's repaid, then we'll reloan it.
I would like to
Yeah.
that might just be a small part of what we do. When you look at the mission of the organization, there's no mention of loaning money. It's to promote the public good, welfare trade, and encourage cooperation among economic development organizations. That's our mission. Loaning money is not our mission.
Here. And that actually is relevant under the dialogue I've been having with my partner, because it depends on what else you do. If all you do is loan money, it's hard to say you're not in the business of loaning money.
Gotcha. Okay.
I mean, we may very well carry out economic development projects. I hope so. They're a lot of fun. So I think that is a distinction, just like, revolving the money is a distinction. Maybe we have a sideline of doing that. But I've never seen anything with Invest Atlanta that has all kinds of loan programs or any of the others that relate to this. And again, there's a herd instinct, and that's what we're talking about. And if the herd's not paying attention to the cliff, then they all go off the cliff together. And I don't want that to happen to us. Again, I am inclined to think this doesn't apply, even taking into account the revolving loan program.
Okay.
I want to take advice about what compliance is required. And if it's not too much, then why not? Because, we might as well. But if it's burdensome, if it hinders the program, if it makes us look silly, then I wouldn't do it. But let me come back to you on that.
Okay.
Okay. Well, everything is towards the idea of going live, and the third document that Ilka shared with us was the timelines. Question I have in my mind is, does the board need to sign off on the resolution with all the accompanying documentation in place before we can claim to go live? Or can that be done in a subsequent meeting after we've published? And because the 8th is what we currently have listed as being the day that we go live with this program. We've resolved some issues, but
Well, there's the live date of the website going live, which would be tomorrow, the media release tomorrow. I don't think we have to have all those things signed by then, but by the time we open this application, I would think we certainly need to. Or maybe by the time we get the first dollar or give out the first dollar, which would be 2 weeks from then.
Well, if we have to modify any of our public-facing documentation, then as a part of what we're doing here, then we have to fix that. But
well, these things are not on the website. These things that Dan are working on, they're not on the website.
Yeah, the question is, are we comfortable taking applications on the 8th of September, having not approved all the documentation that we need to go forward? We haven't even agreed on our First American contract yet, because it's still in the, still in draft.
I say we go live and we get those things done before the 8th. I mean, 3 days this week, 2 days.
I agree. This has been a long time coming. We need to get it underway.
All right. Well, I personally would want to have some time to look at the documentation, and I know some of it's still in flux now. I believe that there's still stuff. Dan's now gotten feedback from First American on certain issues. We could go forward and start taking applications on the 8th, but I want to be able to review the documentation that we're signing off on before I vote yes for it. Whether that means we have to wait until we've got all that documentation done before we go live is another question.
So I see it as a question of, is there going to be a substantive change on the application pending these things that are up in the air? And the only thing that Dan has brought up was this female and minority-owned business not being part of the public benefit. You have to select one thing, and I can see his point on that. But I've already shifted it in the application to add a extra community benefits thing that's optional. You just tell us these things, and it does create, we didn't change the way it scores in the application, but they have to agree to one of the other ones, and then they may also say they're one of these two. So I've revamped that. That's the only I heard relates to the physical application of the place where people enter their data. Everything else on the back end once decisions are made. Am I wrong about that, Dan?
The only other thing might be to add that you can't be covered by the ECOA. Can't be a terrorist.
Oh, on the certification at the end when they sign, do you have a statement that you could paste in the chat that I can drop in?
Well, let me look up what ECOA is.
I say I'm not a terrorist.
It might not cover everything. Actually, that was the wrong one anyway. OFAC, OFAC. Oh, that's Office of Foreign Asset Control. So,
Right. That's not the EC.
Yeah.
I do think we need wording on there saying that you can't, whatever the wording has to be, that you'll be excluded from consideration if you're on some list. Whatever the verbiage that we need to put in, I think that needs to be put there.
You just put something like is well, I can put it in the chat. Let me do that.
Are we capturing all the chat information, by the way?
The video.
The chat actually is in the video itself?
That's what Jeff Montgomery told us a while back.
Okay.
I verified.
Well, just in case, I'm copying the chat
Okay.
window into a text document so that we can have it.
I have one question related to the launch as well. So yesterday morning, I sent the signature page signed by David for the public officials insurance. However, we haven't received the invoice yet from Chastain and Associates for us to be able to pay it. And for the policy to be in effect, my understanding is the payment needs to be in place. So does that insurance need to be in place during the time when the underwriting or selection processes are occurring, or only from the point that the first check is paid? Because I would think that
Okay, it needs to be right away because the risk is somebody getting declined, right?
Right, that's what I was worried about. So that's the other piece that is that I'm a little worried about having it in place by Tuesday, especially since Monday is Labor Day.
I keep forgetting that.
Maybe just and tell them, hey, we need this now. Like, y'all are right next to our building.
Yeah, and
Why
I've
can't
said
they
several times about how urgent it is.
I'll try and tell them to get it done.
Well,
Ilka, why can't they give us a binder?
Well,
without
yesterday he said they would send us a binder, and I'm trying to see. Yesterday afternoon at 4:30 p.m. they said they would send us a binder, and I said okay, and I did not see it. But that the underwriting, I guess, or the selection process is the piece I'm worried about.
But as long as we're bound, as long as they've written the policy and they've given us like the 30-day binder, we can still get rejected by underwriting. We'll have those 30 days of coverage.
Well, no, not their underwriting. I mean, the policy has to be in place for us because our risk point is the decision process for our loans and grants, right? So that decision process starts on the 8th when the application starts, and whenever the applications begin to be reviewed by First American of the loans and grants that we will be the giver of.
Yeah, I mean, a binder would serve as an insurance policy until there was an official acceptance or rejection by the underwriters. Their underwriters, insurance.
Okay.
Yep.
I mean, I know Trey Thompson very well. I could just call him and say, can you make sure this gets done tomorrow if you don't feel like they're responding to you?
Well, I've been dealing with Chaz Chastain, and I thought he's the owner of the company.
He probably farmed it out to somebody working in the building, and they've dropped the ball, and he may not realize it.
Mm-hmm.
Chas handles the city's insurance, so I can reach out to Chas. I'll do that this afternoon.
Yeah, I'm sending him a reminder right now and just saying, like, urgent. I've been telling him all along, this is very urgent. We're trying to get it done fast. You know?
I'll send him an email right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I've
so
that extra certification in the application.
yeah, I saw your chat message. So the question is, do we need a specially called meeting to approve the resolution with all the accompanying documents before we go live on Tuesday?
I think we do. It doesn't have to be long.
Well,
Friday's wide open for me.
yeah, we can everybody can review it between now and Friday. Dan, are you going to get all the other information from First American that are loose ends? I mean, there's things that are outside of our control. Aren't you waiting for stuff from them?
Yes, I'm waiting to hear back from their lawyer, and I'll reach out to them tomorrow.
Okay.
I'll tell them Stephanie will be calling on them if I don't get what I need.
Yeah, I've got a Cocker Spaniel. He's not a pit bull, so I can't.
Hey, did you just call me a pit bull?
No. I was just referring to my dog as a potential enforcer.
It was the best compliment I've ever gotten.
Well, bulldog, pit bull, I don't know. Take a pick. Okay, so back to our agenda. So have we, other than reviewing this documentation and approving it on Friday, which we have to pick a time for, we have not approved the press release. I think that's something else that needs to be approved, right? I know people have looked at it and commented on it.
Yeah, and I just got another set of edits from Jeff. He's always thinking and working on it. I was just looking at that. I don't think the things he's asking me, the questions, it looks like he did. Let me just open it up and you can see what he's edited since the one I sent to you about an hour ago.
Well, what I'd like to do, regardless of what he does, is have a chance to look at all of our documentation that we want before go live and agree to it and move on.
Could I?
Okay, so can everyone see that?
Sort of. Somebody have a suggestion?
Why did he take all business out? Because he put it in the end. I see what he did.
He had to make the headline shorter because he said what I had originally was too long for their system that they use.
So he didn't change anything else.
Let me see what other questions. It does not look like he did. He asked another question. Let me look really quick. It's more about, will businesses in Bogart be eligible? So that will be a question that I just need to explain to him.
Well, if they're inside the county, they should be, right?
Yeah. So we may add a slight clarification that says any business located within Athens, within the boundaries of Athens-Clarke County.
I think it's in the
I mean, it says
second
it right
paragraph.
here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's enough.
So I'll just explain it to him.
Okay.
I think it'll be good. It'll be minimal changes.
I personally didn't have any problems with any part of it. I think it's good to go for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I looked at it. I didn't have any problem with it.
Okay. Is everyone okay with this? It'll go out tomorrow, was what I talked with Jeff about. And then I'm also going to send it. I've got a whole list of community partners that have said they're glad to share it with their networks. Also worked with our Office of Diversity and Inclusion to come up with, folks like the neighborhood leaders that can also kind of help us share the information at a grassroots level as well. So I think we have a good set of organizations. And once it goes out, y'all feel free to share with your networks as well, like both mayors, if y'all have lists that you have to share information, or if Winterville has sites that they can share it on and that sort of thing.
I need this group to authorize me to make the website live so that that link will work when this goes out.
Okay, they still won't be able to apply till Tuesday, right?
I have that application locked up right now.
Okay. Well, the outstanding things that I can think of don't have anything to do with what's publicly facing on the website. So,
And we
I'd like to.
after it's live.
Yeah, just as long as people don't complain about not knowing something after it had already gone live, but I'd rather just go with it.
So you're going to go live at the website, but the application link won't be live, just the website and the press release. And the date for that is Tuesday?
Tuesday the 8th.
Is the go live for the application, yeah.
Okay.
So I'll put a motion.
Sorry, listening and typing.
No, you're good.
Make it formal. Put a motion to that effect.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the launch of the website without the application as of the end of this meeting.
So
All right.
Second.
All right. Second from Kelly, I believe. All right. All those in favor? We talked about this a lot, so all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right. No opposition. We're going live.
Congratulations, board. Congratulations.
So the only thing is unless there's another agenda item, well, we need to set a time for us to not review, but to discuss and approve the resolution with all the accompanying documentation. So when are people available on Friday?
Whenever.
Oh, sorry.
3.
You probably wouldn't want to do same time, huh?
No, not that late. I suggest
You buying drinks, Dan?
All right.
Early,
Yes.
like 8 o'clock or 7:30 in the morning.
no, that doesn't work for me. I'm an afternoon person.
Okay.
I have a call from 2:30 to 3:30. I could do 3:30 if that works for folks.
30, that's cool.
Okay.
Okay, let's allocate an hour. We shouldn't need a whole hour, if especially if everybody's read through it and provided comments between now and then. But
3:30 to 4:30.
Yeah, just to give us a full hour. We hopefully won't need the whole hour, but
Okay.
let's plan on doing that. Okay. Did we all agree to that?
Yeah.
I so move that we do it from 2:30 to 4:30 on Friday. Second.
Second.
All right, Kelly seconds. So all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, we're meeting on Friday, hopefully to wrap up all of the documentation. All right, let's go back to the agenda. I don't think there's anything else under old business or new business that we haven't talked about. Anybody else have any other things that we need to discuss?
Not this meeting, no.
Okay. I'm not hearing anything, so we'll move on to staff reports. Ilka, do you have anything else for the good of the cause?
Yes, I have two quick things.
Okay.
Okay, we talked about set up a JDA email, jda@acc.gov, that we can use to do like the mass notification of everyone who will be receiving a loan or a grant and everyone who will not be receiving a loan or a grant. So that's set up and kind of has our name on it. They're going to set it up so that more than one of us can log into it if we need to. The next thing that is done and ready to go, thank you to Dodd and David for working with Wendy. I created and kind of did some sorting to make it easy for the bank today. The occupational tax spreadsheet with worksheets in it for the bank to be able to check the eligibility related to occupation tax. And that's on the drive if you like that kind of nerdy stuff. So it's there so you can take a look.
Okay.
That's it for me.
All right. Dan, you have anything else to share?
I'm going to curry favor with the board by passing.
Okay. All right. That's fine. Your report's done. So we already have the next date set for our next meeting this Friday. So if there's nothing else, I'd like to put forth the motion to adjourn.
Second.
Stephanie seconds it. All right. All those in favor say aye. Or raise your hand, whatever. Opposed? Okay. We're adjourned. We'll see you Friday at 3:30.
Thanks, everyone.
Everyone.
Congratulations
Thanks.
again.